All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. So today's webinar is going to focus on citizen and organizational engagement with the use of ArcGIS and open data. We have Lee Johnson Jr., who is the local government sales manager today, and solutions engineer Matt Bullock from the state government team to do some demos. We invite you guys to ask questions throughout the presentation in the chat window box, or the question window box in the GoToWebinar panel. We'll have a short Q&A at the end where we will get to all your questions and make sure everything is answered. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Matt, for joining. Appreciate everybody joining today. This is a series of webinars really designed for state and local customers that have an enterprise agreement with ESRI. However, this webinar actually focuses on any state and local government customer because open data is part of your ArcGIS platform regardless of enterprise agreement or not. So a very exciting topic. So today, let's go through a brief agenda, kind of why open data. From there, I'll really turn it over to Matt on kind of getting started in a demonstration. Time permitting, we'll go into QA, next steps in the chat window. If we don't answer your question simultaneously, or we'll definitely address it at the end of the webinar. So why open data? So there's a lot of reasons about this and a lot of reasons why we feel that our ArcGIS platform is a real value add for open data. So one is, what is it? And open data is data that is technically open, machine readable formats, legally open, so that you and I can reuse and redistribute. That would exclude some data such as HIPAA. And it's also data that is free. So citizens and customers of a city, county, or state do not have to pay to get it. What is open data good for? And these are just a few of the things that open data provides. So that would be transparency of government, accountability, participation, innovation, and economic development. I'd also add that it's great for customer service. So many cases with digital government now, consumers, citizens expect kind of this 24/7 notion. So with some of this data being available and open, or many of it, it allows then staff to not have to respond as much to simple requests. So it does add a value of customer service and efficiency as well. And so open data is an innovation, and the slide many of you that are users have seen at conferences or other webinars, but your open data really starts to create a chain of communication between citizens and academia and startup and community leaders and agency staff. And I'm based out of Denver area, and I know the city of Aurora, Colorado, just about 6 months ago used some of their open data to elicit feedback from students on where public Wi-Fi was. So they actually put out what they knew where the Wi-Fi in the city was, and then the students responded back by collecting information out in the field. So open data really is an ecosystem. It's not just a raw data dump. So some of the current challenges and perceptions, I think this is a good slide that kind of where the ArcGIS open data and others came from is more of a catalog and a list. So some of this may seem familiar to you. There's also a perception over time that open data is hard, that it's sitting on a server, I have to upload it to different formats, keep them all updated. It requires a lot of work, and it's just, I'm the only person at this small city or small county, and just it's not scalable. So that's another challenge and perception of the past. Another one is that it's too specialized. So there's been a perception in the past perhaps that the workflows are complex, that an open data specialist on hand is needed by a city or county. You know, and we put it on a portal, but how do we get real value out of it? Is another kind of perception. Another one is that open data is expensive, and certainly with some vendors, the cost of standing up a data portal has a tremendous budgetary impact that could be a salary of a teacher or a firefighter or more. So certainly there's a perception of cost. The other ones, so this is a really good kind of segue, is in the beginning of open data, it was really about why I made it public and how many hits am I getting. But as time went on, some of the hits were just things around like salary information. And really this tweet, I think, it really highlights is not the amount of times your open data was downloaded, but it's what they did with it that counts. So I think that's a real powerful message. So just in a nutshell, this notion of it's too specialized, it's too hard, it's too expensive is not the case right now with ArcGIS open data. And Matt's going to speak a little bit to that in just a second. So why ArcGIS open data? A lot of different offerings and solutions in a crowded marketplace, different value propositions. And we believe that one of the biggest value propositions, and hopefully as GIS professionals you feel the same way, is that we find that over 90% of open data is spatial. And that when you look at things that sometimes may seem just like raw data, is usually there is a spatial component. So if there's school data with cafeteria scores or student grades, that all has a location. In most individuals, it provides more context to what's important to them, and that's their neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods. So yeah, 90% of open data is spatial. And we do allow for, so open data we come across that doesn't have a location is usually budgetary data, purchase, card transactions, things like that. And these are supported in the ArcGIS open data platform as well. So you already do it. Many of the applications that you have, that you're using, really are already ready to be used in an open data format. And open data is part of the ArcGIS platform. Again, this is probably a slide that many of you are familiar with, but it really ties into the overall platform and an extension of ArcGIS Online. So it's a web app. You don't have to download any plugins or software. We host it. It's free. It's a continuous experience to both your internal employees and the external public. And the ArcGIS open data principles are this, that it's accessible, that it's discoverable, that it's explorable, and it's collaborative. So this is an old tweet that was shaded out, but you can see this: the geodata portals are nightmare, walls of text, endless pointing, clicking together, registration before download. Really, this is just not the case anymore. And what we have now are the building blocks, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt to show just how you can get started using open data in your org immediately. I want to harken back to a couple of things that are really important, is that 90% of open data has location. It's going to show just how easy it is to get up and running with the ArcGIS open data.
All right, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Excellent. So what I want to show today is some concepts of how to get started with the actual getting your data prepared, kind of formatting it, getting that into ArcGIS in a way that ArcGIS open data can consume it. And then we'll go through how to actually build open data and then really kind of extend it with, with the title of this webinar. We're kind of talking about the kind of citizen engagement, and also talk a little bit about what some other folks from state and local perspective are doing with ArcGIS Open Data already. And so the screen we're looking at here is actually the ArcGIS Open Data homepage. So there's a documentation page that you guys can go and check out. We can always share those links, but if you just Google ArcGIS Open Data, you'll find this main page here. And what I want to kind of convey in this particular infographic we're looking through is, as Lee mentioned, as GIS professionals, we're very familiar with, feature services or feature data, vector data, various image and raster formats we want to share. So that's certainly right in the wheelhouse of ArcGIS Open Data. So we can share map and feature services, whether that's something on-premise, so using things like ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Server that you're managing, or you host them on ArcGIS Online. That's certainly kind of a core of what ArcGIS Open Data does, but also things like image services, so coming from sharing your imagery content as a service, or I'll show an example of where a customer decided just to bundle up their imagery for their particular county into a single zip file where someone can go and take that. So that's also an option. So that kind of fits into the component where we see that the non-spatial data, so things like spreadsheets and tables and CSVs. So this can be an interactive table that you can have as a service. Again, coming from something you're hosting or hosted in ArcGIS Online, or just a link to a file share. So I know I worked with the state of Virginia recently, and they have, and also like Lee mentioned that one example with the District of Columbia, they have, so Washington DC is sharing various spreadsheets that they want that you can now go and engage with and then download as well. So those can be linked off to things like if you have a file share like Google Drive or other types of cloud hosted or from your infrastructure. And then also other things that you want to share. So we'll see web maps and apps and documents and PDFs. So really it's any type of content that you think would be valuable to people that, your citizens or constituents, or even internally within your organization to make it easy for people to find these content. And then the key with making something like a map or a feature service available is you already probably have those data sets, or it's easy to provide those as services once. So you do that, you provide that, say it's a building permit service. So you say this is now a feature service that I share, and then Open Data automatically will go through and create downloads for people or access points for people in things like open formats like CSVs and KMLs and things. So you don't have to do that data conversion. Kind of harken back to what that slide that Lee showed with the data download, where I have zip shape files and CSVs and KMLs that I'll have to generate. Open Data does that for you. And so what I wanted to, I'll just show this page quickly as mainly like a reference that I mentioned. So if you Google ArcGIS Open Data, this will come up as the documentation. So there's a providers section. It'll kind of go through. So the steps that I'll talk about today is really getting your data ready. Most likely it's already ready in some format, and then just really kind of providing the best way to present that information. And then how to kind of go through and connect ArcGIS Online and enable these capabilities. And so we'll kind of walk through that, but this is a reference that you can go and check back if you ever had any questions. And so what we're looking at here is an organization that I work with some of my colleagues on, so for county and regional government in particular. So kind of the first step, if we've never enabled Open Data, ArcGIS Open Data, and we just want to get started. So the first step is, I'm an administrator in this org, but so either yourself as an administrator or someone that you work with can go into the settings of your ArcGIS Online organization, and you'll see there's an Open Data tab. And so we'll click on this, and in this case, we've already enabled Open Data for our organization. But so it'd just be this, it would be a green button instead of red here. It'd say Enable Open Data. And so once that's clicked, the capabilities of Open Data are just available in your ArcGIS Online organization. So it's pretty straightforward. And then you'll notice that I have a variety of sites, and again, this is kind of a testing site that we demo to users like yourselves. so we see a variety of kind of beta sites and testing, but you'll notice that you can have more than one open data site, which is kind of a key. So think about your organization. So that could be a situation where you have a main site for your city or county or just department that can be sharing content between groups or projects or departments, or just one for the main entity that you work for. Or you can even have things that are more temporary in nature that you want to share information about. So things like a marathon or a big event happening, a Super Bowl, or a weather-related event. Maybe there's a hurricane coming, or there's some type of, in that case, that's probably the one disaster you probably could play because you know it's coming, right? Set up a site that you can share apps and data to help kind of that collaboration. So just you have that ability to create multiple open data sites. This is all just part of the subscription that you already own. So what I wanted, so that would be kind of the first step, and then we really kind of will go through the concept of how do we get our information into ArcGIS Online and into ArcGIS in general, and then what we kind of do. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and say cancel, and I'm going to go to my groups here. So we've enabled open data on an organization. Now I need to get some information into an ArcGIS Online group and enable that for open data. So you'll notice here if you go to your group, so I'm signed in with my identity, and then there's a nice little link over here that says find groups that are designated for open data. And so there's a few in here. My colleague Dave has set up one for, just as an example for I'm in Colorado, like as same as Lee. So this is an example Denver open data site. And so this is just an ArcGIS Online group that you guys are probably familiar with. And really the only big difference here is you'll see this kind of parentheses open data. And all that means is we go in the settings of the group itself. So we gave it a nice thumbnail and information to kind of know what this content is and some tags to help find it. But really there's this designate as available for use in open data sites. And so we make sure that's clicked available. And then we also will set that as public. So open data is public. We want this group to be public. And then we need to designate this for use in open data sites. So in this case, it already is checked, but that was just kind of the one little caveat for group settings. And then you also notice Dave's provided a variety of content in here. And so in this case, let's say we click on some bike racks. And so he's already provided a nice thumbnail, but that kind of really about getting your content in a way that you'd want to present it to your users, whether that's internal or external folks that are using this data. So they kind of know key pieces. So kind of name, summary, description are pretty straightforward, right? So he has a description here, but you can even do something like, I'm going to go in and just make sure that's saved there. So now we have a summary as well that would show up. We want to make sure there's some good tags in here, and we'll see these here. So things like Denver, and this is cycling and bikes. So when someone is searching for that information, whether that's in ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Open Data, like I'll show in a little bit, they'll be able to find that content. And what we don't have here, in this case, because it's a demo for some Denver data, is really, so your entity, when you want to share your content, that we have this access and use constraints. So think of this as kind of, if there's any type of, as it says here, so any kind of restrictions or like special disclaimers you want to put, or terms and conditions that you want to, so it's still open, right? Open and free data, but maybe just kind of caveats to the data and how maybe it was created and the accuracy of it and the kind of the time that it was created and things like that. So those will be pushed through into open data. When I search for that content, I would get this information provided to me as a user. So I mentioned earlier, so I provide, so this is a hosted feature service, right? So this is a hosted data set that we have, some vector data of some bike racks available in Denver. But there's one setting in here that I wanted to just kind of highlight, and he already has this enabled, but you see this, there's an export data, and what that allows is without this checked, so a feature service or a map service would be able to, someone would be able to download a zip shape file or a CSV or a spreadsheet or a KML of that data, But if you enable this, in this case it's a hosted data set, so that's kind of the caveat here, is hosted in ArcGIS Online. But you can enable this export data, and you notice it says other formats. So that allows you to, the user could, which is kind of a popular item, to download a file geodatabase as an option as well. So that's kind of from the data set side. And so I'll highlight really quickly some kind of concepts. So maybe you don't already have if you have some services in ArcGIS Server and they're not available yet in ArcGIS. There's a couple tools to do that. So right in ArcGIS Online, I can go into the My Content section. So these are things that I'm creating. And you'll notice there's an add item. So I can go add item from the web. And I get a variety of options. So maybe I have some WMS or WFS services I want to share, or even just some documents that I have linked out somewhere. This can also be where you make an ArcGIS Online item for another website that you want to link to. So you can add content here, and this can be shared then to that open data group, or groups, if you will. I just highlighted one group, but you can have a variety of groups, and I'll show that as well. Just an idea of this. So this would be kind of a one at a time type of scenario. And if you haven't seen from our partner GeoJob, this is a tool that I use as a lot as well. So this is the free version. So you can, the caveat would be you're an administrator role in your organization to do this content. So I can go under and use something like the item tools. And there's this nice register of services. So this would be if you wanted to connect your ArcGIS Server services and make it a little bit more streamlined. That's something that's certainly available as well. New recently is this, we have an ArcGIS API for Python as well. So that's kind of that, this can be org administrators. I don't have the tab open for that, but just kind of talking through it is if you wanted to maybe script publishing content, you can also now do that available, whether that's on-premise ArcGIS Enterprise and Portal, or in this case ArcGIS Online that we're talking about with open data. You can actually script some of that out. So that's a common question I get, is how do I get my content available to be ready in ArcGIS Open Data? So that's kind of a few of the options you have available for you. And so we've enabled like I mentioned, we have an open data group that we've shared some content to. And then, so kind of the next step is, so we've enabled open data in the organization. That just happened once, and then you're good to go. And then you'll have your groups and content that you're sharing. And then we actually go and actually configure an open data website. And so that will lead me into this dialogue here, and I'm going to go ahead and take that back. And so you'll see, here we see a variety of sites that other folks have already created in my organization. But I can actually go in and just create a new site. And so in this case, I'll say, I'll do something like local government open data. And what we're doing here is designating the actual URL for our new website that we're creating. And so you'll notice the full URL is going to be kind of my organization's name with a local in front of it, because I selected that as my site URL. A common pattern we also see is to create a kind of authoritative, or add authoritative domain. So this will allow some redirects. So it could be something like opendata. Your organization's authoritative domain name.gov, right? So whatever that is, and I think we have some examples of that as well that I'll be showing. So just that's also a common pattern we see. So add your own .gov or authoritative domain into that. And then really popular as well, I just want to highlight, is you can tie in some, if you have Google Analytics going, you can tie this in so you can track the interactions that are happening in your site, whether that's data downloads or, as I'll show in a bit, the ability to kind of select like who's interacting with what types of applications that we kind of center around here. And so in this case, I'm going to leave it. It comes with the US, but you would definitely zoom into your jurisdiction. So if we wanted to, excuse me, zoom in a bit. Since I'm in the Colorado area, I'll just draw an extent for us here, just to give you an idea. And then this is going to go ahead and save my site. So it's This is still a private site, so really it's going to show up in kind of my sites and my other folks that are enabled for open data. And then when I'm ready to finally go and share this site with the public, I can go and enable that later. And so what we see, it kind of helps me, just, you notice we kind of move through in the dialogue of I have the options for selecting various groups here. And so that one we looked at earlier, I can actually go in and select it and say, okay, these, if I wanted to maybe look and see what's in there again, I can see what kind of content is available in that group. And I'll add that one here. And so these are groups that are enabled for open data that are in my organization, but maybe I'm collaborating with some folks that are outside of my organization. And so I can uncheck this and look at, you'll notice there's a whole host of groups that show up here. But I believe if I do, this is a good example of what to do. So Aurora did a good job in naming their open data group Aurora Open Data. If I just do things like open data, there's going to be a whole variety of open data sites, you'll get the picture, that just say open data in them. And so it's a bit hard to collaborate with other folks. So I'm going to leave just this Denver open data group in here for now. We'll say next. And what this did automatically was push me into a user experience, user interface that I can quickly begin and kind of going through and doing kind of a WYSIWYG. So what you see is what you get editor to create a site. So you'll notice when I kind of hover over this kind of out of the box items that are in here, I get some options. So the first one here is I can go in and kind of move items around. But this gearbox is really the one that we're interested in. So I can go in and select this type of content. And I'm editing. And I'll go ahead and take this sub off. So the concept within this builder is we have some stuff that comes out of the box, but whenever I select a gearbox or I'm dragging and dropping content into the website, I'll get some options here. So let's actually go back to the editor and kind of walk through some of this content. So the first options we get here is for a header setting. So it's absolutely fine. I think most of the examples I'll show, it's just kind of out of the box. You can put the name for your site. And this will show up in various, if I do, I'll talk about the concept of pages in a second. And this will show kind of it going through. And if I don't have a logo URL here, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this. And then the next one we have here, and I think if we, yeah, so this now shows up as my header here. But I have the ability to go in if I wanted to do some custom work and kind of match the other look of my websites. I have that full custom HTML and CSS if you have folks that want to kind of enable that. The next one is there's a few options here, and I know they're continuously adding some more. So I know coming soon will be things like custom fonts. Maybe there's something specific there. But this kind of allows to change some of my, if I want to change some of the colors here. Let's see. So that should be fine for now. Just to give you an idea of this will now change to a different color up here. But this will then carry through into things that I mentioned earlier with what we call pages. And so when I'm creating multiple pages and then my home page here, all of my styling kind of carries through, so I don't have to repeat that concept. And then the layout builder tab here is really the kind of core of what we're going to do. And so what I want to kind of highlight is this concept of rows and then individual cards. And so what we see here is for an image and this text and this banner, those are cards that we can drop, so card types that we can drop onto our page here. And so if I go and drag, so you notice it's kind of a drag and drop experience. So I've inserted a new row here, and then I can push content into that. So maybe I want to add some text here and an image. And so you notice when I I can select the gearbox here, and that allows me for the image to go out and find a specific URL. So maybe I have that hosted somewhere, or I'm linking from another website that I have. So maybe I have some websites of how to kind of help you with the customization that we'll share at the end. And so that there's some other icon websites. If you don't necessarily have a graphic designer to work with, you can access that content too. And then what I want to show in this text card is the ability to really go and configure a site that it allows you to use. It's pretty much we're going to be pushing. You can just put direct text in here like we see, and it's also using something called Markdown. So that's the key caveat within ArcGIS Open Data is you can build a site. Our site is now built. So if I went to go and launch a website here, so if I go and view my site, I now have an open data site with a URL that's built and it has my data in it. So then when I go and search this content, I will get, you'll notice, see what if we want to go and look at our bike racks. So I have that data set available, shared. So in a matter of minutes, I can have an open data site ready to go. And then it's really up to you about how you want to configure your site, just depending on the type of staffing and resources you have to make this happen. So that's where I want to kind of...
So Matt, this is Lee. So I think I timed it. I think that you created that in less than 15 minutes. That's impressive. So nicely done. And just for some context, or maybe people that have tried this in the past, I mean, in the past, how long would that have taken to get you up and running or something like that?
So if I was using the old version of ArcGIS Open Data?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's more of a matter of a few days because I really had to apply more CSS and styling and HTML to really make a site that we're looking at here. So if I close this here. So the ability of getting this styled the way it is currently, yeah, it would have taken more like, instead of minutes and hours, it's more like a few days to get it configured, which is still an improvement of even the past iterations before ArcGIS Open Data of trying to make a website from scratch, which is more like weeks and months. So definitely shortening that time frame for sure.
Great, thanks.
And I want to highlight a couple more, just kind of give you an idea of what you can do in a card. So you'll notice that out of the box, it just gives you some example categories that you can tap into. And that's this categories tab here. So if you notice, let me just drop it in the middle. It'll probably look a little weird. And I'll go ahead and click our gearbox here to get the settings for that category. And so I'll say, we already have a boundaries to just give you an idea for the boundaries data set here. And then, like I mentioned when we were looking at that bike racks data set, so tags are really important to search for, but one of the newer features that you have in ArcGIS Open Data now is to center this around a group. So I can say for my boundaries data set, this will allow me to designate a specific open data group for that category. So that really helps. It's important to have the tags for searching, but it really makes sure that all of the content you want for that type of category will show up, and it makes it kind of makes it an easier process to help organize your content in that way. So I think that's a useful feature that I would definitely be using for our category section. This would be kind of what you would designate on your homepage here, and then say, I want to use a specific group. And then in this case, I have one group in my site, but if I had more, I would get a list here that I could select from. We do have a nice feature here to, out of the box, we have some icons you can select here. And this just kind of a variety of different types of icons. And you'll also notice that you can go, and so I'll select this for sure for our boundaries. And then you can select a color. Let's make it a little greener there. You can also provide, I think a lot of folks are going to be providing their own icons that they have that might match some of the styling that they have on their other websites. So you can certainly just click this option and then link to a URL. So categories is definitely going to be a main one. So kind of images and text. Banner, you would really kind of use, this is our banner option here. So that's really be for kind of the top of your page. And then some of the content that some of these new cards that I think are very interesting is this concept of a chart. So this allows for, and I think it's best almost to show some real world examples, and I have some from some local gov folks that I'll show in a second, but I can drag and drop and wire this chart. So I can have an interactive chart that's coming from live data sets. So I'm going to select a data set in here. We'll just use bike racks. See if there's any kind of, I don't know, the information in here. So I can look at station manufacturers, see if we get any information in here. There's just one. I was wondering about that. So you'll notice it's an interactive chart that we can wire up, and then say I want to go and actually change our data set. So I can say police stations, and maybe we'll get a little more here. So this will be actually the station name that we're pulling in. Give you an idea there. So you'll notice you can also delete cards very easily. So when I'm helping users build sites or building one myself, I'll kind of rapid fire through and just see what looks and feels right to me. And you can always go and re-add that. So if I want to go in and drop in, say, something like a summary statistics, which, like our charting card, has a direct connection to a data set that we share into open data. So we can also go in and do things like garages. We can see what kind of maybe duration they have. So the duration of the folks in the garage, I believe, is what we're looking at. And I'm going to make that count. Changed up a bit. So you get the idea of, you really can, I have some examples of this that are pretty interesting. So really being able to share not just our data, but start providing other content that we want to share within that. So I think that's a good segue into, so caveat, or the kind of concepts here is we can quickly design a website that fits the look and feel that we want, and really just in a matter of minutes have a site ready, but then kind of dig in if we want and configure things the way that we kind of want the look and feel. So what I'm going to do is show some examples from users and then kind of go back and show a little bit of how they design some of that. So the first one I want to highlight is Johns Creek. And so this is Johns Creek, city of Johns Creek in Georgia. They've done a really, really great job designing. They've had a past ArcGIS open data site, and they've recently deployed the new ArcGIS open data website builder. So I think we're calling it like the 2.0 builder here. So, and what they've kind of enabled in this concept is, this is their homepage. You notice they've kind of matched the look and feel of the website, the other websites they have, and how they wanted to do that here. So we get things like our data categories. And you'll notice kind of once you start looking at these sites, you'll see rows and cards in that concept, right? So this is a row that they've enabled with a few cards here. And same here. So we're looking at another row, and they've enabled some cards that are kind of out of the box that you can enable. So what I want to look at is building permits. And what happens here, so when I select this, I actually go, and you'll notice up here, it's their open data site, /pages, /building and construction. So they've actually named so this is a page that they've linked to. So you can provide a home page for kind of interacting with high level, maybe some apps and some data you want to share. But if you have specific projects or focus areas that you want to enable, this is a really great way to kind of channel that information. So you'll notice here they're talking about building permits within the last year, and just like I showed with that charting widget, is they've enabled a chart here, a pie chart of their various building permits by type, and it's an interactive, and it ties directly to that feature service that they wanted to tie in here. They've also enabled some mapping, so if we go in and look at some of the heat mapping, it'll kind of show some of where the construction's happening. So we're obviously a map-centric company, so we want to have the map in here, but it's also not, you'll notice it's not the driver of this entire page. It's really important to kind of, it provides value to context to this information, but so does some charting. And they also have, you'll notice here, one that I didn't talk about too much is this iframe card. which I'll go back real quick. And there's an iframe card. So this really, with the iframes, you can embed other applications you have. You can embed PDFs and videos I've seen that people will do. Really any kind of other dynamic content that you want to enable there. So that's kind of done via an iframe that they've done here. And they've actually enabled an operations dashboard with their building permits data to help provide some more context to people. So you notice in this page, at the very bottom is kind of the data download, but I'm getting information, so maybe this is all I need. So maybe I just want to get some questions answered here and look at some maps, or even just look at their dashboard they have here and kind of use it in that context. Or they've also had it, this is a simple button that they've enabled in here that's kind of all within the builder. So when I select this, I go directly to their building permits data, and then I can now interact with the information and do some filtering. Or if I want to go ahead and download that information right now and provide that. So I can now maybe do my own analysis or things that I want to do with it as a GIS professional or someone a little bit more advanced that I want to download that data. So I can click this download button, and like I mentioned before, Open Data will provide it as a spreadsheet, a KML, or shapefile for you. And also it's nice, so they've enabled for this service the file geodatabase download as well. So I can select this and it will begin downloading that, and it must be a pretty small file because it's already downloaded for me. If there's folks that want the direct service, which is also important in open data, but I think for citizens, that's kind of where you provide a variety of ways to interact with this information. So I can tap directly in, and it says Geo Services, but think of this as just the REST service directly to this building permits data set. So I can access the service, I can download the data, or if we go back here, I have a page that I can kind of consume and interact with this information. So I think this is a really great example that will help kind of maybe provide some food for thought, or how you can maybe organize your information. So they've gone through, and each one of these is pages that they've designed. I believe they all look and feel the same. So maybe there are different charting numbers here, but so for police incidents, they have some kind of charts built in, and you'll notice we get a similar heat map and an operations dashboard, and then I can go and actually download the information or consume it. So really a kind of a consistent look and feel, but targeted to specific information really helped me kind of focus in. And it's really using a concept that in kind of the user interface design world called progressive disclosure. So we start with our main site, and there's a lot of information coming at us, and we can kind of slowly go through that and consume it. But maybe I want something specific like we see here, so we go back to maybe go to business locations, and then I'm fed a little bit more information, but I consume this content as I'm scrolling through, and at the end I still want some more to further that, and I can go and access this kind of the last piece of getting that data. So I think that's an interesting concept. So another example from Summit County, Ohio, I believe. Similar look and feel, you notice, but we see a lot of rows and cards, and they've added some other, I mentioned, you can kind of pull in your own icons for your data categories here. Something a little different that I mentioned earlier was they have this, I think this is, I'll click this, I think it's a big download. Oops, it's not working. So you notice it linked directly to that zip file with their imagery. So that is something where if you wanted just a straight data download of some type of data, that is still something that some people still want to provide. So they can go ahead and select that. But most of the website itself, you'll notice pretty straightforward and similar to what we've seen with the Johns Creek. And that's kind of by design. We provide a framework that's really easy to use, and you can kind of just take off and run with it. And one more example I wanted to show is one of the users recently kind of share a story about, so Iowa DOT has had an open data site in fact, all of these users have had quote-unquote open data for quite a while, and that's providing data as downloads, sharing information. So, and most of you are probably in the same boat. You've been sharing, doing open data in some form for quite a while. So, in Iowa DOT, a few years ago, enabled our first iteration of ArcGIS Open Data, And then recently I did a similar webcast and worked with them, and they took off and ran with it. And so I think they had this fully configured, styled website, which is really nice. I think they said it was about 2 hours for one staff member to go and migrate their content, because they had already built a website, but essentially they would be, and so this was created from scratch in terms of the styling. They had their data ready, but they had to style it. So this is an interesting one that they have. So this is a state DOT, but think of your public works departments as well. This could be, so this is a winter operation. So they have some really great apps that tie into like winter cost calculations and kind of the 511 apps and Track-A-Plow. They have an app called Track-A-Plow that all ties in here. So I can get the data directly or go to that app, or I can actually look, and this will take me to the page for their winter operations. And we'll notice we have some, it shows the number of active trucks on the road, the total cost for the past 48 hours, salt applied. So in this case, they didn't have any snow events. So this is pulling directly from their live data that they feed into these winter operations apps. So I think this is a really interesting one from a perspective of, I go to the winter operations page, I get some quick summary statistics of what's happening. I can go directly to their apps that they have and kind of link out to those. They also, this is loading up a web map here that they've shared to kind of provide some context if I don't want to leave the page itself. Or I can get, and this is really where it's interesting, is I don't know if folks on the phone are familiar with our feature collections, but it's kind of a lightweight iteration of a feature service. So in the case of they're doing near real-time tracking of their snowplows and information, so they've actually made, so I can look at snowplow locations that I can either get the feature service itself or a collection. So this is an idea of maybe you can have iterations of types of information you want to interact. So I think some really great examples of kind of pages and cards that users have deployed. And like I said, for this Iowa DOT one, it was a couple hours essentially for them to get this. And so they've shared some other infographics here of equipment costs for the past decade and things, and salt and what's been applied. So I think it's a really interesting infographics that they can kind of share and provide that content to the users. So I want to quickly show some of the pages concept. And so this would be kind of the main website here. And I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, go back here. And you'll notice when I said create a new site, and I get the information here. And you'll notice there's a pages tab here. So I'm going to say pages, and I'm going to add a new page, and we'll call this just similar to that kind of idea, just give you an idea. And I'm going to go ahead and edit this page. And just like our home page, we get some examples out of the box of some content we want to leverage here. And very same layout builder, so the same one that we looked at earlier. So I actually want to go in and drop a banner in here, and I'm going to go, since this is the default that came with it, I'll delete that. And I'm going to wire this up. You'll notice that there's a little button in here, so you would kind of wire it up to go to that specific data. But just to give you an idea of how you could quickly kind of leverage a page. I'll save this page. And then I actually now can go back, and I have this winter operations page here. And that is now, I can now connect that to our main site. So I think this is the part where it's it's almost easier to go and start testing because it is so fast to build. And so what I want to show is, so we've kind of created a home page. You can create pages and cards, cards within pages to really kind of help focus that around initiatives or projects and things like that we saw with the 3 user examples. But there's also, and I'll share this in the chat window, this is an open data site that is customized to help you configure your site. So it'll kind of actually go through and say, hey, how did someone do that? And so with a little bit of copy and pasting, essentially, you can go through and look at, it kind of gives you some ideas for what's the best way to host your images you want to pull in, the type of images. I think it even has some links to some of the image sites that I was talking about. So this is technically a little bit of coding, but it really provides the exact example that you need. So it's all HTML and a little bit of CSS, but again, you wouldn't need to do this, but we have some resources if you want to go and so I think with Iowa DOT, they have their main example there, a couple hours, they converted their site and built that really nice site they had. But their GIS person did the bulk of it, and they worked with one of their IT web people to kind of help with the graphics and some other content. So they worked as a team together, and that seemed to be really successful for them. So that might be an option for you as well. But just wanted to provide some examples of kind of we're now really allowing people to go through and kind of configure this, and this kind of gives some examples of different charting and what to avoid and kind of things like that. This is a very similar site as well. And I'll share these, like I said, right now in the chat window. So that's about what I had from a demo perspective. So I think we got a little bit of time here for some Q&A, is that right? And I'll kind of, let me see, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'll put these 2 links here into the chat window.
Yeah, it's one thing I just wanted to, can you hear me, Matt? You still there?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, one thing I know we'll open up some Q&A. I put in the chat window kind of some of the next evolutions of open data, and certainly one of the areas we're seeing too is with the Ways Connected partner program that allows cities and county states to send road closure information, special event information to Waze, so Waze will dynamically route its users accordingly. And in return, the city, county, or state gets traffic data from Waze as well as accident information. In some cases, I saw a presentation a couple weeks ago that sometimes now first responders are getting information faster than from 911. So certainly not exactly part of this presentation, but if you're interested in open data, that is an absolute partnership, the ESRI Ways partnership to look at.
I think that's a really good point too, and I think, so actually a good example of that is the city of Johns Creek, like I showed with those building permits, and they're actually collaborating with Waze, I believe, to do that kind of that community program as well.
So do you have any questions for Matt or myself? I tried to answer, or I think I answered all the ones on the chat window, but if we have time, we can certainly open it up right now for any live questions. But I will, if not, I'll just keep talking, but if somebody wants to interrupt me, great. So just a couple things. I kind of would take action. So instead of putting the chat window, I think, almost like unbelievably, this is free. Yeah, it's part of your entitlements, whether you're an ArcGIS Online subscriber or desktop user entitlements. So as long as you have ArcGIS Online, you have access to open data. So one of the kind of the call to actions that I would ask is do what Matt did in 13 minutes, especially if there's something you're really proud of that you built, because the exposure to your work now goes beyond just what is inside the city, but also the public. So I would say, and set up more. If you've already got it going, try more. And then, the other thing I'd say is, Matt and our emails were on there. We'll make sure Nicole sends those out as well. But give Matt or myself a call if you have questions. It is an absolutely hot, trending topic in GIS right now. I mean, and it's really popular. So if you have questions or need help, let us know. And then the other one, we want to, just like Johns Creek was up there, we want to celebrate customers doing amazing things. And Johns Creek's a great example because it's not a huge city with a huge staff. So if you have a great story and you're on the call right now, by all means, let us know. We want to see it. So Those are just a couple things that I wanted to make sure that we impart with. So I think there's another question. What is the link to your last example? So is that the Johns Creek one that they were wondering about, Matt? Or I think you put all the links down below. I also have these links too. So
I can go back and actually share my screen maybe to the URL. Is that what that help?
That'd be good. Yep. Okay. And the other one was, when will this broadcast be available for download or reviewing? Nicole, do you still on the call?
Yes, I'm still here.
When will the broadcast be available for download or reviewing?
We can usually get these uploaded within a couple days. We'll have it linked back on our ELA webinar homepage, and it will be a YouTube video, so you can view them whenever.
Okay. All right, Matt, I'll give you back control here, and hopefully we can answer the question for Desiree.
So the last couple examples, and I think it might be easiest to just write these down here. So one of the configuration, he call it deep customization, but it's really just configuring. Nothing deep going on here, but so if you want to go ahead and write that URL down. And then also the other configuration site. And you'll notice that these are actually open data sites, so it's kind of following that same opendata.arcgis.com links. And then it looks like someone did put in the Johns Creek example, so that's good. We'll just show that here. So let's go back to the main page if you want to write that down. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. And same with the County of Summit here. And then Iowa DOT, let's go back to their main. So this is their main site, so data.iowadot.gov. That's a good example of a custom URL that they wanted to add in there, to add their own iowadot.gov domain. So. And I think, so Lee included our emails in there, so if that was too fast or you have other questions or didn't get a chance to write stuff down, definitely shoot Lee or I an email.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I mean, I think the last question there is what is ESRI doing towards? So we're continuing to build the open data around initiatives. So you'll see that some of the competitors are doing this as well, but open data, as you can see, or many of you are familiar with, really takes off when it has a spatial and tabular and data component. So really feel that's a big driver. And then lastly, this is kind of taking open data to the next level. But if you look at things like the Long Beach hub and the Los Angeles hub and some others like Loudoun County, Virginia, so our hub product then really takes that level of engagement to the next level. And that is where there's really a two-way communication of data back and forth between the public and the city, county, or state. So I'd say part of what is a positioning to alternative competitors is that true engagement of startup communities, of education through our hub product, which is sharing of data, but also allowing a lot more of that sharing back. So if you don't follow the, there's, I think, an ESRI Open Data website. Yeah, the Open Data on the ArcGIS blog there. Here, let me show my screen one more time. So the ArcGIS Open Data on the ArcGIS blog and the ArcGIS Open Data on GeoNet. I would absolutely follow those two because those were all product announcements come out, and sometimes there's things that we didn't even get a chance to discuss today that already are very positioned nicely against some of our competitors.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point with the the ArcGIS blog, and I think even she just recently put it on GeoNet, but a member of the Open Data team, she posted a nice blog about configuring pages and cards and how to kind of make dashboards out of those. So we covered a little bit of that, but just an idea of, I think it was just this week that she put that up there. So they're kind of always putting out little ideas and new announcements and things there.
Yeah, I think the other thing too that we didn't really talk about today, that like, I don't even know that it's necessarily a development, but more of a utility, is when Matt did the demonstration, a lot of those solutions were off-the-shelf solutions that we've developed so that you can quickly go to market. So maybe it's road closure information. And when you look at our open data, there's also a value internally, right? So road closure data, maps of crime, maps of available development areas, green belts. These are information products that have utility in a geospatial format throughout departments. And this is really this kind of evolution of GIS of not, hey, we're going to do a bunch of map requests and not a, let's put out a map with 100 to 200 layers, but let's give people inside the organization the maps and apps that are most relevant to their job. And that's where you really see this open data, I think, position us really strongly against competing technologies is it has utility both in an open data format, but also in the Public Works Department, in Parks and Rec. So I think that's something that we probably, I'm glad that question got asked, because I don't know that Matt and I probably stressed this enough of its utility, not just to the public, but when configured correctly and in a distributed model, adds value to other people and organizations. So off my soapbox. That was long-winded.
Absolutely. I just to, not to one more thing us here, but one more thing. The team, the open data team, is currently in development and it kind of figuring out the process of being able to enable open data sites that are specific to your organization. So you would have to have a login. So in that case, it's quote unquote not open data, but it would be a way to use this technology to frame websites and pages to share internally, and then maybe you have some, the kind of definitely that content outside. That being said, right now, if it's still kind of, you may have data that can be shared that's really like a page for your organization to be accessing in terms of that information content, and Lee mentioned those applications. So that's something that can be done today. But there are talks of how do we have both a public open data site, but also the same technology in the website builder, but for a more maybe project focused kind of an internal view, if you will. So just what's coming next.
Yeah, and I think the other one too, of course the last question got asked I get most excited about, but the other part is what is the value. I think one of the things that continues to need to be the discussion is, if you look at that one slide, it's like, it's not what the data is and how many times it's downloaded, but what the value it brings. And I think that's the conversation that continues to need to be had, is what's the value of this? Is the value just check the box for some people in the organization to say they did it, or is the value to drive change or a particular initiative within the community? I think that's the component that is really crucial. So with that, we are officially 7 minutes over. Thank you all for joining, and certainly Matt and I are available with any questions. Emails should be there if you didn't get questions answered. You just want to continue the conversation, and certainly we can also, if needed, connect you with cities like Johns Creek and others if you want to talk at the user-to-user level. So thanks again.